Okay, graphing on a coordinate plane. Some things to know. Some teachers will call a coordinate plane a Cartesian plane. It's the same thing. Okay, so don't get those confused. Coordinate plane graphing, Cartesian plane. Okay, some things you need to know about the coordinate plane. You need to know that a coordinate plane has two axes or axes. The first one is the x-axis. It is the horizontal axis. That right there would be the x-axis. The vertical axis is called the y-axis. It's like we took two number lines and put them together perpendicularly and got a whole plane. It's kind of a cool deal. Now, there are also 4 quadrants. The way I remember which one is which is I remember this is called a what? Coordinate plane or a Cartesian plane. And if I took the letter C and drew it on top of this, it would be like this. Because you always draw C here and you go this way. So, in my head, this is quadrant 1, and it is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. That's truly how I remember it. I start here to make my C, 1, 2, 3, 4. Goes that way. So that's x-axis, y-axis, and 4 quadrants. You've got to know those. Okay, to graph an ordered pair on a coordinate plane, you always start at the origin. The place where the two axes cross right there is called the origin. It's the origin where the two axes cross. That's our starting point. Every time we go to graph, we start there. So, to graph the point 3, 2, I'm going to start at the origin, which is 0, 0, it's 0. And I'm going to move 3 in a positive direction because over here, if I go this way, I'm moving positive. If I go this way, I'm moving negative. Same thing works with the vertical axis. Positive is up and negative is down. So, I'm going to start at, and remember, this is x, this is y. You always start with x first, and x is always the horizontal. So we start at the origin and we move over 3. Now I'm going to draw a line just so you can see me moving over 3. So 1, 2, 3, right there. And then the y thing says y, so now I'm going to move positive 2. Okay, maybe I am. There we go. I sort of went past it. But anyway, positive 2 is right there. That's how you actually graph something on the coordinate plane. You don't really draw the lines, you just count over 3 and up 2. You always go over first, so it's always over, sideways, and then the second thing is either up or down if it's negative. Let's do another one. Okay, let's graph the ordered pair negative 4, 2. So you start at the origin right here, and you move left 4 because it's negative. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you go up 2 because it says positive 2. So 1, 2. And you get to this point right here. And that is actually the ordered pair, negative 4, 2. That's where it lives on the coordinate plane. Let's try another one. 3, negative 2. Let's do that one. So where do we start? Let me change colors. We start at the origin and we move over 3 in a positive direction. Remember, it's always side to side first. So 1, 2, 3. And then it says negative 2, so that's down 2. So 1, 2. So right there is where 3, negative 2 is. Now, I could ask you a question like, okay, where does the point negative 4, 2 live? Which quadrant is it in? And you would say quadrant 2, because remember, this is quadrant 1, this is quadrant 2, this is quadrant 3, and this is quadrant 4. So the other point that we graphed, 3, negative 2, lives in quadrant 4. Now let's take a second to notice something about the quadrants. Every single point that's found in quadrant 1 is going to be positive. It's a positive x and a positive y. Because it doesn't matter where I go in this quadrant. If I go over, up, over, up, over, up, I'm always moving in a positive direction both times. So, what you could say is that quadrant 1, all of the points are positive. It's a positive x and a positive y. In quadrant 2, what do you think is going to happen? Quadrant 2, what's going to happen if I go over, up, over, up, over, up? My first point is always going to be negative, and my second point is always going to be positive. Okay? Let's think about quadrant number 3. Quadrant 3, if I start at the origin and I go over and down, over and down, over and down, what's going to happen to my point every time? It's going to be negative, negative. See it? You go over negative, you go down. That's negative. So all the points in quadrant 3 are negative negatives. What about quadrant 4? Quadrant 4. What's going to happen? I'm going to start here and I'm going to go over and down. Over and down when I'm graphing. Over and down gets me to quadrant 4. So my first point is positive. My second point would be, my first coordinate is positive, and my second coordinate is negative. So every point in that quadrant is positive, negative. So, now, based on that, I can look at an ordered pair and tell which quadrant it's in. For instance, when I look at 5, 6, I'm going, oh, those are both positive numbers. 5, 6 lives in this quadrant. Lives in quadrant 1. It's the only one that they're both positive. Then I can look at negative 3, 8, and I can go, oh, that lives in quadrant 2. Because that's the only quadrant that has a negative x and a positive y. It has to live over here. And then, the third point, negative 2, negative 4, it has to live down here. Because that's the only place it can live, because that's the only quadrant that has a negative x and a negative y. Then I look at 6, negative 5, it has to live in this quadrant, because that is the only place it could live and be positive x and negative y. Now let's graph those. Okay? If I were to graph, I'm going to scoot this in. Well, no, I'm not. Okay, to graph the first point, 5, 6, I would go over 5, start at the origin, go over 5, and up 6. So there it is. Okay, that's the point 5, 6. Negative 3, 8. I would start here, go over 3, and go up 8. I have to go in a negative direction since it's negative. It does not want to write on that part. That's weird. Anyway, it's sort of up right about there. Then to graph negative 2, negative 4, I would go over negative 2 and down 4 and be right there. And to graph 6, negative 5, I would go over 6 and down 5 and be right there. It's easy to graph points. Now, here are 4 points that are graphed. So now we need to figure out their address. What is the ordered pair that goes with these points? So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the origin and move over till we get on the line that's on. So move over. That got us to 5. So that's our x value. And then we have to move up 3. So that's our y value. So that's 5, 3. Let's do another one. Let's do this one, the one in the fourth quadrant. We have to go over until we get to that line. That takes us to 7. So that means the x is 7. And the y, we have to go down till we get to 5. Now, when we went down, that's negative 5, right? Can't fit my negative sign. So 7, negative 5. Which makes sense because remember this quadrant, it's always positive, positive. This quadrant, it's always positive, negative. Let's do another one. From here, if we go this way, all the way to here, that's negative 8. We moved over 8. So the first one here is negative 8. And then we went up 5, so that's negative 8, 5. That's the ordered pair. The very last one, you go over negative 3, and then you go down negative 2. That's how you find an address for an ordered pair. Okay, now we've talked about lots of points that lie in quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4, but we haven't talked about the points that lie on the x or y axis. Okay, so let's graph these points and see where they lie. Okay, you start at the origin and you go over 5 and you get right there, and that's 5, 0. Well, guess what? Negative 5, 0 is right here. Negative 5, 0. 2, 0. 2, 0. 3, 0. So all of these points lie on the x-axis. These lie on the x-axis. So you just learned something. Anytime the y value is equal to 0, there's no y, it's 0, then the point is on the x-axis. So if I said to you, okay, where is negative 14, 0, you would go, oh, negative 14, 0 on the x-axis. If the y is 0, the point is on the x-axis. Now, some of you are already thinking, okay, then that must mean if the 0 is in the x spot, it's on the y-axis. It's kind of like reversed. That's right. So 0, 4 means you start here, you don't go anywhere, but you go up 4. So there's 0, 4. And 0, negative 2, you start at 0 and you go to negative 2. So there's 0, negative 2. What about 0, 8? 0, 8. And 0, negative 3 is right there. So if your x value is 0, you end up on the y-axis. So if I said to you, where is this point located? The green point. You would say, oh, that's in the second quadrant. That's in quadrant 2. And if I said to you, okay, where is this blue point located? You would say, oh, that's in quadrant 4. So what if I said to you, where's this new red point that I'm starting now at? Where's that new red point at? And you'd say, oh, that's on the x-axis. So when it asks you what quadrant something is located in, some things are not in quadrants, it's okay to say on the x-axis or on the y-axis. Okay, sometimes when you're graphing, you might have one of your ordered pairs with a fraction in it. Don't let that mess with your head, or a decimal. You graph the same way every time. So let's graph this one. I zoomed way in on the graph so you could see how to do it. So you start at the origin, you go over 3. 1, 2, 3. And then you go up 4.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and a half is right in between 4 and 5. So your actual dot would be there. Ignore that random line. I touched the screen with my finger when I was graphing and it made a random line appear. Okay, now let's try the other one. We'll do it in blue. Okay, so start at the origin and go negative 2.5. Well, isn't that 2.5? Yeah. So go over to negative 2.5 and stop halfway in between the negative 2 and the negative 3. The lines are the numbers. And then I'm going to go down 3 because it says negative 3. So down 1, down 2, down 3, and there's where that point ends up. Okay, so it's okay if you have a fraction one.